What's up, beautiful people? It's SINDYAKPOLO. Welcome to the channel. Today we have this very interesting video from Sowell, and it's titled Asian Americans are overachievers. This is why. Okay, awesome. I'm excited to check this one out to hear what Sowell have got to say on this one. Let's check it out.
What about Asian Americans who often seem to, as a group, perform better in school than other groups? Why is that?
I think the one four-letter word we can't use is work. And they just work. I mean, I remember when I was teaching at UCLA and I had to go on a Saturday night to the research library, and as I looked around, almost everybody I saw was Asian American. I looked in vain for any black students there, not many white students there. So the following week when I go to class and I find the Asian Americans better prepared, there's no real mystery to it to me. They work.
Wow.
You say the Chinese succeed because they outwork everyone else.
Oh, yes.
Is it that simple?
In a sense, yes. That if you put in enormous amounts of work, you're going to have a tremendous advantage over people who don't. A study was done in San Francisco schools to show Asians, blacks, whites, Hispanics, and how they score in various fields, and mathematics in particular. And there were vast differences, for example, between the Asians and blacks in terms of how many got high math grades. What struck me was that for both the Asians and the Africans, the number of hours that you spent working or doing homework in math was almost identical with the same percentage who got high grades in math. So that whether you're black or Chinese, if you spend an awful lot of time on the math, you're going to be doing better than the person who's not. And although there were great disparities, the disparities were differences in how much time you spent on math homework.
Well, then conversely, Dr. Sowell, are you not saying that groups who do not overachieve are groups who don't work hard enough?
Sometimes, but sometimes the government itself makes it impossible or very difficult for groups to work hard enough. The minimum wage law is one classic example. Occupational licensing laws are another. Insofar as the school system fails, those groups that don't have an independent educational tradition are lost. Whereas if you have that independent tradition, even if you go to a bad school, if the parents can help you, if you get the maximum that you possibly can from the books and so on, you still may achieve quite a lot. So it's a combination. It is the culture, but at the same time, insofar as the society puts barriers, particularly the government, which has tremendous power, and supplies education and other kinds of things, insofar as they do that, they make it tougher for you to do it.
Well, do you suspect that you may be guilty of de-emphasizing the effects of racism in that pattern?
There's always, everything is a possibility. But as I look at the data, I don't find any correlation between the degree of racism and the degree to which groups advance. That is, if you look at the history of the Chinese in Southeast Asia, the hostility they have encountered there will compare with any hostility blacks have encountered here. There have been a number of occasions in the history of Southeast Asia where the number of Chinese killed in a few days exceeded all the blacks lynched in the history of the United States. So they are enormously hated.
What about Jews?
The Jews, of course, the same thing has happened with the Jews numerous times. Thousands killed here, thousands killed there. And of course, under the Nazis, millions killed. The groups, incidentally, which have suffered the most violence, and I use that as one index of group hostility or racism, those groups have typically been middleman minorities. The Chinese, the Jews, the Armenians, the Igbos in Nigeria, 30,000 of those were killed in massacres just within our time. And yet I don't find any correlation in the long run between the economics and the political hostility.
All right, let's get back to the primary criticism of your book made by a writer I really respect, William Raspberry, syndicated columnist. He says that you make these points, but you don't say what we should do.
What we should first of all do is understand what does and does not work. I don't consider myself to be a policymaker, despite what the media may try to say. I consider myself to be someone who tries to supply facts so that those who do make policy will know what they're talking about, as they usually do not.
Now, speaking of what the media says, you have stopped giving interviews for the last couple of years.
Yes, I should have stopped many years before that, actually.
Why do you say that?
I see no correlation between what I say and what the media reports. One of the most hideous things that I've seen reported was on the CBS Morning News, where they said or suggested that I was a believer in the theory of genetic inferiority of blacks. Now, I have been arguing against that theory for more than 10 years,
Wow.
and I don't know how many books, how many articles, and how many lectures. This was so well known that British television tried to arrange a debate between Arthur Jensen and me. I don't know why the word got to London, but it never got to Washington.
So you have been wary, to say the least, of the media.
I think that's an understatement.
Let me quote to you again, wealth, poverty, and politics.
Wow, interesting. And I've learned a lot from Dr. Thomas Sowell, and I urge lots of people to go learn from Dr. Thomas Sowell, because like he said, and that is true, work hard regardless of your skin color, because many people always make it to place it that your skin color is what will take you to some level or would give you better opportunities than somebody who doesn't look like you. And the question is, people are forgetting that people put in the work. Yet people are so obsessed with skin color that they are forgetting that while your obsession with your skin color is putting you down or is keeping you at some place, some other person is putting in the work because they don't want any form of limitation. And you see somebody somewhere who is successful regardless of their skin color, people forget that these people put in the work. It took a lot of sleepless nights and steady working to get to where they are. But of course, the race hustlers will always paint it and make it to say, oh, it's because of someone else's skin color. It just don't make sense. Honestly, it doesn't. You wonder why some group of people work harder than some particular group of people, because some people put in the work while the others don't want to put in the work. Some people always look at their environment as a constraint or as a limitation or as an excuse, because some people are better or would rather blame it on somebody or make it that somebody else is the cause of their failure or somebody else is the one sitting somewhere and will not let them succeed. There is only so much the society can do, and the rest is up to you. Your destiny is not tied to the hands of the society. That is why you get tons of people immigrate from a particular region to another region, because they want a better life. Search for something better, put in the work and achieve greater heights or achieve something better for themselves or for their families. And that is how they immigrated to or migrated to some place better for them, while others would stay and say, oh, they are only going to be dependent on the government before they can be successful, whereas is not the case. You have to put in the work regardless of your skin color. But all the same, let's continue to hear what Thomas Sowell have got to say.
Let me quote to you again, wealth, poverty, and politics, quote, without the cultural prerequisites for developing natural resources into real wealth, the raw physical resources themselves are of little or no value, close quote. Tell us what you mean by cultural prerequisites.
Partly, that would be simply the knowledge of how to use things. As I mentioned in the book, the main difference between us and the caveman is simply human capital. Don't forget, the caveman had all the natural resources we have today, and he had them in greater abundance because none of them had ever been used up. But he didn't have the knowledge that it would take to turn those to his own purposes.
We just know more.
Yeah.
We just know more. Now, you note a certain productive capacity that certain cultural groups demonstrate. And you can see them because they demonstrate the same, let's call it industriousness, as they disperse to different parts of the world.
Yes.
Germans, Chinese, Lebanese, Jews, Indians, quote, the productivity is a matter of culture. That productivity is a matter of culture is shown by how many groups have arrived in various countries far poorer than the existing population and have nevertheless risen above the economic level of those who were there before them, close quote. Let's just choose, you name a lot of groups, it's a big book. Let me just toss one at you and see how you do. The overseas Chinese.
Oh my goodness, the overseas Chinese settled largely in Southeast Asia. Many of them came there with little more than the clothes on their backs. There was one Chinese millionaire in one of the countries who had in the foyer to his mansion this stick with a little cloth thing tied to it, because he walked into this place with that stick, all his belongings, and this little cloth thing tied to his stick over his shoulder, and he took off from there.
All right. The Jews.
Oh my heavens, that's been in so many places. My gosh, the Lower East Side of New York, one of the most terrible places when the Jews landed. The poverty and squalor is just unbelievable. In fact, even as late as the late 1940s, when I went to school on the Lower East Side, I'd always heard that all Jews were rich. And when I saw the Lower East Side, I said, why are these rich people living like this? The buildings on the Lower East Side were older and in worse conditions than the buildings in Harlem where I lived.
And they don't live there anymore.
No.
Those neighborhoods have turned over?
Yes. And it went by generation. The generation that was there first, even when they rose up to where they could have moved, they didn't, because many of them were not fluent in English and so on. And so you could live on the Lower East Side knowing only Yiddish and find doctors, lawyers, anything you wanted, going to stores and so forth. And if you moved up to upscale places like Harlem, which was once Jewish, or to the Bronx, which at another time it became Jewish, you would lose that. The more acculturated people, the next generation who spoke English and were more familiar with American society, they lived in those kinds of places.
Got it. So why is it that in many instances that you detail, you get a subgroup, the Chinese move to Fiji, and why is it then that so often we see the pattern that the indigenous, the people who were there first, fail to get with the program? And to the contrary, not only do they not get with the program, learning the skills of productivity, they tend again and again and again to persecute the groups that came with nothing but achieve a certain level of affluence. So we have the Jews, that's an old story, ancient story, the persecution of the Jews. But you also show it with the overseas Chinese and Malaysia, with Indians in East Africa, and on it goes. What's going on there?
Well, for one thing, there's no particular reason to have expected the indigenous people to have acquired the same skills that the people who came there had. And worse yet, the leaders of these groups are very quick to blame the fact that they are lagging on the other groups who are more advanced. One of the phrases that you often hear, that this group took over this whole industry. And in many cases, there was no such industry until they came there and built it. Right. They did not take it over.
Right.
Wow.
Right. So those are examples of the way culture can promote or enable economic productivity. You also provide a counterexample. The Soviet Union. Quote, the Soviet Union was almost a tailor-made refutation of geographic determinism. Explain that.
Oh, the Soviet Union was one of the most richly supplied countries with natural resources, and probably the most richly supplied. It was the only industrial nation which has so much petroleum that they export oil.
Right.
They have some, I don't remember the fraction, but they have a substantial part of the world's supply of natural gas, which they're now supplying all over Europe. Iron ore, manganese, you name it, they had it. At one time, something like half the industrial diamonds in the world came from the Soviet Union. The land was so rich that when Hitler sent his army in to invade the Soviet Union during World War II, he had plans to have the railroads take back this land from Russia into Germany, because it was that well known for its
You mean just the topsoil? He was going to send boxcars of topsoil back to Germany?
That's right.
I didn't know that.
It's one of the most fertile sections and the irony is, one of the world's great famines occurred in the Soviet Union.
How come?
Mismanagement by the government. Milton Friedman once said that if the government took over the Sahara Desert, there would be a shortage of sand. And the Soviet Union, it was just that way.
All right. More on social factors. I'm quoting again from Wealth, Poverty, and Politics. This is tricky ground. There is empirical evidence against genetic determinism. We're talking about IQ scores now. For example, there have been whole communities of whites from isolated mountain regions in America whose average IQs have been similar to or lower than the average IQs of black Americans. But while such evidence undermines genetic determinism, that does not make mental test differences irrelevant. So we're not genetically determined, but disparities among ethnic and racial groups are still worth noting, still consequential. How do we put this?
No, you're seldom hiring a whole group or admitting a whole group to college. What you're doing is judging individuals. And the predictive validity is really a totally separate question from the question of genetics versus environment. See, in other words, if the IQ test does not have a single question about flying an airplane, and you give it to people who want to become pilots, the only real question is, do the scores on those tests correlate with the subsequent performance of people in the air?
Right.
But you see, I mean, it sounds so simple when you say it that way, but the Supreme Court of the United States had a totally different take, that the employer must validate a test that is not job related. And so what they're saying is, it's a question of whether this test seems plausible to third parties who have neither expertise nor experience on the job. And that would be the criterion for whether it's a good test.
Wow. Well, that is the learning case for so many people, and I base it that it's individual experiences, and I don't think people are successful based on their skin color, because with some particular group of people, we still have some people who work hard and some people who are lazy. Skin color is not a factor that would be determined to say some particular group of people are better off or some particular group of people would achieve success more than some particular group of people. While also environment also plays important role in people's lives, it's also an individual thing. People can grow up in this exact same environment, and somebody would decide that they no longer want to live in that type of environment because they want something different for themselves, and therefore they would move to a different environment that would help them achieve whatever they want to achieve, while somebody else would be in that same type of environment and would still go on a repeated cycle. But all the same, I've learned a lot from Dr. Thomas Sowell, and I urge lots of people to also learn from him and read his books, because he's a noble and intellectual scholar. He's 93 years old now. 2024 he's gonna be 94, and he's an international treasure. And ever since I came across Thomas Sowell, I've learned a lot. Many people would find it really useful to learn from him as well. But all the same, for people who always think that is their skin color that is a limitation to their success story or to their success, they should remember that when you put in the work, you will get the result. The people you see today who are successful, they did not wake up overnight and become successful. They actually put in the work and they achieved or became a success. Success does not happen overnight. It requires time and devotion. Are you willing to put in the work to achieve or attain the success level? Or are you just waiting to sit down and blame it on the society, or blame it on your environment, or blame it on your counterpart, or blame it on somebody that doesn't look like you, or blame it on something, because it is a lot easier to put the blame on something or somebody than to blame yourself or to look inwards. But all the same, it's always going to be individual choices. But I'm sure tons of people have got different opinion regarding this, and I really love your honest contribution to this. Are you an immigrant yourself? At what age do you immigrate to a different country or to another country, and at what level or what duration or time frame was it before you attained the success level, or you got something better going for yourself than what you had in your home country? Or if you immigrated with your parents, at what age was it when you immigrated with your parents, and how is life going for you as an immigrant? And have there at any point you thought your skin color to be a limitation to your success story, or out there at any point you decided to put in the work to achieve or attain the success level. I would really love your thoughts on this. I mean, everybody have got different experiences and different stories to tell, and I would really love you to share that in the comment down below. You can share all the useful information you think might be really helpful. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe and all of that stuff. And until next time, see you in the next video.